This pattern is wonderful. It's one of my favourites. Simplicity 1512. It's a very simple apron, absolutely great for him or her. It has some very good features on it, which you can keep or leave off. That's the beauty of sewing your own. It has a top pocket. It has a D-ring attached to a little tab, so you could hang keys on it if you want to. So if you're using it in the garden, you want to put your key on. But the things I particularly like on it are the big double pocket at the bottom. Now this has been stitched on with 2 parallel rows of stitching, so it's an ideal opportunity to use a twin needle. And I love sewing with twin needles, 2 perfectly parallel rows of stitching at the same time. And the other thing it has are these eyelets that you use to thread the neck cord and the waist ties. And again, I'm going to show you how to use a really nifty little eyelet tool to get those perfectly. The first job on this apron is to do a double hem all the way around the edges. And to do that, you fold in the hem allowance and then tuck the raw edge in again. So effectively folding it in twice, hence double hem. Fold it over, give it a nice press. And I'm going to stitch close to that inner fold. And that's all those raw edges nicely hidden away. I'm going to use the edge of the presser foot along the edge of the fabric so I can keep a nice straight line and move the needle over to the left as far as it needs to be to stitch on that very edge. And to move that needle, I use my stitch width button, pressing the minus, and it moves the needle across. And again, that's something you can do on most machines. Just reverse stitch to anchor the stitching. And now all I have to do is watch the right hand side of the presser foot, making sure it's going along the edge of the fabric to get a nice straight row of stitching. When I get to the corner, I'm going to stop with the needle down, just taking that pin out. Needle down, raise the presser foot, pivot the fabric, and I'm ready to go again. And continue all the way round. I'm now onto the pocket, and this is made by having 2 pieces cut, so it's a self-lined pocket. So right sides together, I'm going to stitch around the edge, just leaving a turning gap in the lower edge. So again, as I get to a part that I want to turn, leave the needle down, raise the presser foot, and off I go. So that's now ready to trim and turn through. So I'm going to trim the seam allowance, not the bit that I've left open. I'm going to leave that untrimmed. So I'm just going to trim it down to about 6 millimetres, 1/4 inch. It's difficult to show that it's actually close to the stitching, which is here, because the thread I've used matches the fabric so well, which of course is the aim. And the corners, if you see, I trim those at an angle, and that means when I turn this through, they will come out in nice points, as they're supposed to. And this is when a point turner comes into its own, or a knitting needle will do. And I can use that point to push out the corners. And the aim is to get the seam right on the edge. And that's now ready to be pressed. So press it with a hot iron. Always protect the fabric with a press cloth. Pressing so that the seam is there. And then in the opening, pop under the seam allowance. And then when I stitch the pocket onto the apron, the stitching which I'll do nice and close to the edge, so it's called edge stitching, we'll close that opening up. So I'm going to use a twin needle so I can stitch those 2 perfectly parallel rows of stitching at the same time. Saves time, don't have to go round it twice, and you also get them perfectly parallel. Now this twin needle is a 4 millimetre wide gap between. You can get different gaps, you can get 1.6 going up. Both needles are on one shank, So it fits most machines, and it's the shank that goes up, flat to back. There's a flat section on the shank. I've taken the other needle out, so I pop this one in and tighten the screw by hand, and then using the screwdriver or the tool for that final turn. It's very important. If you don't do that, what can happen is the needle can work loose as you're stitching, wobble about, break or bend. The other thing I'm going to do is put on the second spindle, and on this machine I've got a little hole here to put it in. You'll either have a little hole for your second spindle, or sometimes it will fit onto the bobbin winder. And then of course I need a second reel of thread. So I'm going to thread this through exactly the same way as the thread that's already in. And then above the needle I've got two hooks, one left, one right. So I've put one thread to the left and one thread to the right, and that will keep them separated as they go through the needle. Having cut the thread at 45 degrees, I'm just going to slip a little bit of white, paper is fine, behind the eye of the needle so that I can see the eye of the needle, because I can't use the needle threader that comes on the machine. Pop that one through. And then do the same for the left-hand one. Before I attach the pocket to the apron, I'm going to top stitch around the top edge. So this time I'm going to move my needles over to the left. Remember, you've got two needles, so you've got to make sure both go through the throat plate and the hole in the foot. Once I've finished doing around the top, I can then attach the pocket to the apron. So I'm just stitching on the spot there. So on the back I have a zigzag stitch because the bobbin thread has gone between the needles, and on the top two perfectly parallel rows of stitching. I'm now going to stitch the pocket to the apron. So I'm going to stitch around the outside edges, down the side and along the bottom. And as I do so, I will be closing up the opening that I'd use to turn the pocket through. So I'm going to start by stitching on the spot, and then off I go. Again, I use the edge of the presser foot as my guide. Stop with the needles down and turn the fabric round. It's a little bit more difficult because I've got two needles in, so I'm going to now raise them, straighten out that little kink, pop the needles down again, and I'm ready to go down the next bit. Depending on the fabric that you're using, this is a reasonable weight, medium weight fabric. If I was using something a little bit more solid, I might also increase the stitch length, because you need a longer stitch length when you're sewing through heavyweight fabric. And of course I've got a double layer of pocket and the seam allowances, so that's 4 pieces of fabric, and the base fabric, so basically 5 layers of fabric there. So an increased stitch length would help that on a heavier weight fabric. So the pocket is stitched all the way round. The next stage is to divide the pocket into sections so that it's not just one big flappy pocket. So the first division is to fold it in half and pin mark so that you have got that high. I'm just feeling underneath so I can feel that pocket. I'm going to place a pin at the halfway mark, top and bottom. I don't want to pin through the fabric at this stage because obviously I'm going to open out the apron. And now with that opened out, I can now stitch from there down to there to halve the pocket, and then I will stitch again and again. And again I'm going to use the twin needle so that keeps that sort of feature, and then I'll have 4 pockets. So I've just stitched on the spot to start. do the same again, going from here, this corner, straight the way down. Pockets now on, so the next thing to do are the eyelets in order to attach the necktie and the waist ties. I'm going to use eyelets that come in two parts, and I'm going to use the tool. Now, you get packs with the tool included, or you can get refill packs, and the instructions on how to use it are on the back of the pack, so really nice and simple. So I start by taking out the base and popping that underneath the position, put the ball on the top, and then whack it with a hammer. I've made my hole. So I'm now going to turn that over. I'm actually going to pick out the fabric that's been cut. So I turn that over now, and I want to put the eyelet through. So I'll turn this over. Sit that into the base, put the top on top of it, holding it all together, and again whack it. Just check whether it's done. It's one eyelet. I've got the neck tape here. Now the pattern says to use a 1/2 inch wide tape, 2 layers stitched down both long edges to get a nice firm tape, but I've actually used an 1 inch wide tape folded in half and stitched down the one edge. I'm now going to feed that through my eyelet, and I feed it from the front through to the back, about 2 inches, 5 centimetres. Tuck the raw edge under, and then I'm going to stitch those 2 pieces together with that raw edge tucked inside, stitch across the top of it there and also across the bottom, just where that tucked in piece is, to really hold it firmly. And I will use a longer stitch length, so I'll increase the stitch length to about 3.5 because I've got to get through all of those layers. So I'm going slowly with this because I'm stitching through so many layers, and having gone forward, I'm now going back, and I am helping it to guide through. So I've stitched it across in both the top and the bottom of holding that little turned under piece in. I'm going to do the same thing for the waist ties, both at the eyelet end and at the other end, tucking in the raw edge twice and top stitching it in place so that it's all nice and neat.